Consequently, a multipolar world order is being formed. New centers of power are rising, representing the interests of the world majority. More and more countries and peoples are making a choice in favor of truly free and sovereign development. They are abandoning totalitarian liberal dogmas and gaining firm support in traditional values. This year, we celebrate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. The crushing defeat of Hitler's Germany and military Japan marked the defeat of a hateful Nazi ideology. It marked the collapse of attempts by its bearers to enslave entire nations, deprive them of their identity, and ultimately destroy them. The collective security architecture of World War II guaranteed mutual respect for sovereignty. It ensured non-interference of states in other people's affairs. It upheld the right of countries and peoples to choose their own path of social, political, and economic development. Unfortunately, not everyone has learned the lessons of history. Today's hegemonic attempts of the West to change the balance of power in the world threaten global and regional security again. Rehabilitation of Nazism and Nazi collaborationism became a prologue to the policy of the Kiev regime to destroy the Russian-speaking population in the southeast of Ukraine. This provoked a long-term Ukrainian crisis. What is the reason for the reproduction of this deadly historical wedge? In my opinion, it is a matter of colonial thinking in the West. Namely, the habit of dividing humanity into two unequal parts, the pre-alleged minority and the oppressed majority. The first is to perceive themselves as inhabitants of the so-called flowering garden. The second is to perceive themselves as a nourishing soil for this, with the permission of the gardener of racism and violence. A retrospective analysis of the history of international relations shows that the source of all the largest military conflicts of the last 3 centuries was a narrow circle of almost the same Western European states. Starting with the 7 Years' War of 1756-1763, which for the first time in history took place on 5 continents, and ending with the Second World War, we see the same thing. The predatory aspirations of the Western metropolises are engulfed in conflicts that bring enormous destruction and human casualties, both in Europe itself and many thousands of kilometers from it. The criminal Hitler's doctrine of liberating living space, which received the deserved sentence of the Nuremberg Tribunal, is a direct birth of this neo-colonial policy and logic. Its specificity lies only in the fact that it is expressed in a revealing, brought to the absolute human hateful form. Therefore, the victory over Nazi Germany, military Japan, and subsequent successes in eliminating the remnants of the system of colonialism are inextricably linked. The fight against neo-colonial manifestations remains a priority of Russian foreign policy to this day. The most important component of this struggle is the strengthening and development of multilateral integration formats. The interaction within these formats is based on the principles of equality, mutual respect, and non-interference in each other's affairs. In Eurasia, there is already a wide alliance of our allies and partners on the cooperation of independent states. This includes the organization of the Collective Security Treaty, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the emerging Greater Eurasian Partnership. This alliance has great potential to form a just and democratic architecture of international relations. Such an alliance as the BRICS has great potential, especially in its current extensive composition. Western media like to call the BRICS an alternative to the Big Seven. However, unlike the Big Seven, the BRICS is an alliance of equal powers, striving to jointly find answers to the most acute challenges of modernity. The aforementioned international formats, such as the Afro-Union in Africa, the Latin American FILAC, and others, are the fundamental basis of a multipolar world. This world is steadily moving towards the change of unipolar liberal globalization. The West could take a worthy place in the emerging world order if it abandoned the habit of imposing its own rules of the game on other countries. Some signs of the awakening of Western elites to a new geopolitical reality are already visible. But they are still very, very weak. We can see in particular how the so-called deep state has become very hostile. It has caused President Trump's plans to topple global propaganda of transhumanism and liberal democracy in order to deal with the truly important problems of American politics and economy. The American leader's attitude towards the cessation of conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East is no less fierce. The internal struggle in the United States is literally not for life, but for death. This is evidenced by the numerous attempts and threats to Trump. In Europe, the resistance to the wind of multipolarity is even stronger. The European ruling groups, accustomed to living under American protection, seem to have become accustomed to strategic thinking. Unfortunately, the leadership of the European Union and the leading European states continues to act in the spirit of neo-colonial inertia. A vivid manifestation of this is the Ukrainian crisis. Europe is adamant in its attempts to use Ukraine as a ram against Russia. It simultaneously arms itself. European citizens are convinced of the need for militarization, frightening them with the alleged threat from the East. By the way, Hitler also acted in a similar logic on the eve of World War II. The sane politicians in Europe understand the danger of such a course for the entire continent. Their voices are becoming louder and louder, not only on the part of the so-called liberals, but also on the part of totalitarian democracies. In particular, this is evidenced by the crisis situation around the presidential elections in Romania. It is also shown by the pursuit of national unification in France and an alternative for Germany in the Federal Republic of Germany. Dear colleagues, today, when the foundations of international order and security architecture are shaken, Russia, together with its friends and partners, again takes on the burden of leadership. It takes an active part in the search for ways to resolve the global crisis. I would like to add that our country has historically been a guarantor of a fair world order. This was the case when the Viennese system of international relations was created in the first quarter of the 19th century, after the end of the Napoleonic Wars. This was also the case during the bipolar world order as a result of the Second World War. Both these systems, the Viennese and the Yalta-Potsdam one, were characterized by longevity, reliability, and stability. They provided humanity with long periods of peace and stability. On the contrary, the Versailles Peace and Order, created after the First World War without Russia's participation, turned out to be unfair, fragile, and invincible. The unipolar world that arose after the collapse of the Soviet Union also turned out to be unfair, fragile, and invincible. The following is the obvious conclusion. Russia has no right to be weak. Russia has no right to renounce its own values and pursue the chimeras of totalitarian liberalism and globalism. History teaches that the security of the Eurasian continent and ultimately the entire world depends on Russia's strong position. Of course, such strength is impossible without good, truly equal relations with neighbors in the Eurasian region and like-minded people around the world. I am confident that together we can find a peaceful solution to the most complex global problems. The meeting that is taking place today, with your participation, dear colleagues, is a good basis for this. Thank you for your attention.